"They're not going to like this one bit," I muttered under my breath, adjusting the bulky alien headset once more. The damn thing never seemed to fit right. It was like trying to squeeze a square peg into a round hole, or more accurately, a human head into an extraterrestrial communication device. But hey, that was the gig, wasn't it? First human alien diplomat, a title that sounded way cooler on paper than it felt in practice. Here I was, stuck in a cramped alien lab on a planet that smelled vaguely of sulfur and ammonia, trying to communicate with a species whose vocal cords sounded like a dial-up modem on steroids. "Ready when you are, Ambassador," chirped Dr. Zog, the lead xenobiologist. He was a towering figure, with skin that shimmered like polished chrome and eyes that glowed an eerie shade of violet. He reminded me of a praying mantis crossed with a disco ball. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. "All right, let's do this," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the sterile confines of the lab. The experiment was simple, in theory. The aliens, fascinated by our canine companions, wanted to understand the bond between humans and dogs. They were particularly interested in our military working dogs, those four-legged warriors who served alongside our soldiers. The aliens had provided a pair of their own dogs, if you could even call them that. They were vaguely canine in shape, but that's where the similarities ended. Their skin was a mottled patchwork of scales and fur, their eyes glowed with an internal light, and they had an unsettling number of teeth. My job was to interact with these creatures, to see if we could establish some kind of rapport. It was a long shot, but hey, stranger things had happened in my line of work. The first dog, a hulking beast the aliens called a krellhound, approached cautiously. It sniffed at me, its nostrils flaring, its glowing eyes studying me intently. I extended a hand slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. The krellhound hesitated for a moment, then nuzzled my hand with its snout. A wave of relief washed over me. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But then things took a turn. The second dog, a sleeker, more agile creature the aliens called a razorfang, lunged at the krellhound, its teeth bared in a snarl. The krellhound responded in kind, and within seconds, the two creatures were locked in a vicious brawl, their snarls and growls echoing through the lab. I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. The alien scientists, however, seemed unfazed. They observed the fight with detached curiosity, their violet eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Fascinating," Dr. Zog murmured, his voice a low hum. "Such primal aggression. Such raw power." I watched in horrified fascination as the razorfang sank its teeth into the krellhound's neck, drawing blood. The krellhound yelped in pain, but retaliated with a swipe of its massive paw, sending the razorfang sprawling across the floor. The fight continued for several minutes, a whirlwind of fur and scales and bared teeth. By the time the aliens finally intervened, separating the two creatures, the lab looked like a war zone. I was shaken to my core. "What the hell was that?" I demanded, my voice trembling. Dr. Zog tilted his head, his violet eyes narrowing. "A demonstration of their combat capabilities," he explained calmly. "These creatures are bred for war. They are our most formidable weapons." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Weapons?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "Indeed," Dr. Zog replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "We have learned much from studying your military working dogs. We have taken their natural instincts and enhanced them through genetic engineering. These creatures are faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any Terran canine." He paused, his eyes gleaming. "And this is just the beginning," he added ominously. "We have plans for even more advanced breeds." As I stared at the krellhound and razorfang, their wounds already beginning to heal, a chilling realization dawned on me. We had inadvertently unleashed a new kind of terror upon the galaxy. And there was no telling what havoc these alien war dogs would wreak. The following weeks were a whirlwind of diplomatic chaos. News of the alien war dogs spread like wildfire, igniting fear and panic across the human worlds. Politicians demanded answers, military strategists scrambled for solutions, and the general public clamored for protection. Meanwhile, I was caught in the crossfire, shuttling between the alien council chambers and human high command, trying to broker some kind of understanding. It was like trying to mediate a peace treaty between a pack of wolves and a flock of sheep. The aliens were surprisingly open about their intentions. They saw the war dogs as a natural evolution of their military might, a way to ensure their dominance in the galaxy. They argued that other alien species were already developing similar bioweapons, and they couldn't afford to be left behind. Humans, on the other hand, were understandably terrified. The war dogs were a nightmare come to life, a chilling reminder of our own vulnerability. We had always prided ourselves on our technological superiority, but now it seemed like the aliens had one-upped us in the most disturbing way possible. I tried to reason with them, to appeal to their sense of morality, but it was like talking to a brick wall. They simply didn't share our values, our aversion to violence, our respect for life. To them, war was a natural state of being, a means to an end. The tension reached a boiling point when the aliens announced their intention to deploy the war dogs in a live combat scenario. They claimed it was a necessary step to test their effectiveness, but we all knew it was a thinly veiled threat, a show of force designed to intimidate us into submission. I pleaded with them to reconsider, warning them that such a move would inevitably lead to war. But they were unmoved. They had grown arrogant, convinced of their own invincibility. In a desperate attempt to avert disaster, I reached out to Dr. Zog, hoping to appeal to his scientific curiosity, his thirst for knowledge. I reminded him of our shared goal, to foster understanding between our two species. Dr. Zog, I said, my voice earnest, we have a chance to make history here. We can show the galaxy that cooperation is possible, that even the most different of species can find common ground. He listened patiently, his violet eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. When I finished, he simply nodded, his expression enigmatic. I understand your concerns, Ambassador, he said, his voice a low hum. But we must also consider our own interests, our own survival. He paused, his eyes gleaming. Perhaps, he added slowly, there is a way we can both achieve our goals. A glimmer of hope flickered in my chest. What do you have in mind? I asked, my voice eager. Dr. Zog smiled, a chillingly predatory smile. A challenge, he said, his voice dripping with venom. A test of strength, of skill, of will. My heart sank. I knew what he was suggesting. A duel. A fight to the death. He continued, we will select our finest warriors, our most formidable war dogs. You will do the same. And then we will see who truly deserves to rule this galaxy. I stared at him, horrified. You can't be serious, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But he was. And as I looked into his glowing violet eyes, I realized that there was no reasoning with him, no turning back from the path we had set upon. The challenge was set. A brutal, high-stakes contest where the fate of our species hung in the balance. It was a scenario ripped straight from a gladiatorial arena, a throwback to a more primal era. Yet here we were, on the cusp of the 25th century, facing an ancient test of might. Humanity scrambled to prepare. Our best military minds convened, strategizing our approach. We couldn't rely on brute force alone. We needed cunning, intelligence, a touch of the unexpected. We combed through our ranks, searching for a champion, a warrior who could face the alien war dogs and emerge victorious. The selection process was grueling. We evaluated soldiers, athletes, martial artists, anyone with a spark of potential, a glimmer of that indomitable human spirit. But one name kept surfacing, a legend whispered in hushed tones within the Special Forces community, Sergeant Major John Reaper Kane. Reaper was a force of nature, a man forged in the crucible of countless conflicts. He was a master of hand-to-hand combat, a weapons specialist, a tactician par excellence. But more than that, he had an unbreakable will, a burning intensity that could not be extinguished. I was tasked with approaching Reaper, with convincing him to take on this impossible mission. I found him in a secluded training facility, sparring with a dozen elite soldiers simultaneously. He moved like a phantom, his strikes swift and precise, his eyes cold and focused. When the session ended, he approached me, his face a mask of sweat and determination. You have something for me, Ambassador? He asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. I explained the situation, the challenge, the stakes. He listened intently, his expression unwavering. When I finished, he simply nodded. I'll do it, he said, his voice firm. For humanity. A wave of relief washed over me. I had found our champion. The aliens had chosen their contenders as well. A Krellhound named Ragnarok, a monstrous beast with scars crisscrossing its body, and a Razorfang named Nemesis, a sleek predator with eyes that glowed with malevolent intelligence. The arena was a vast, open plain, ringed by towering alien structures. Thousands of spectators gathered, their murmurs a low hum that vibrated through the air. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation and dread. Reaper stood at one end of the arena, clad in a sleek black combat suit, his eyes fixed on his opponents. He was unarmed, save for a combat knife strapped to his leg. The aliens watched from a raised platform, their expressions smug and confident. Dr. Zog stood at the forefront, his violet eyes gleaming with anticipation. A hush fell over the crowd as the signal was given. Ragnarok and Nemesis charged, their powerful muscles propelling them across the field. Reaper watched them approach, his body relaxed but alert. As they neared, he sprang into action, his movements a blur of speed and agility. He dodged Ragnarok's massive jaws, evaded Nemesis's razor-sharp claws. He weaved and bobbed, a phantom in the dust and sunlight. The aliens watched in stunned silence as Reaper outmaneuvered their war dogs. He was faster, more elusive, more unpredictable. He seemed to anticipate their every move, to dance just out of reach of their deadly attacks. Then, the unexpected happened. Reaper stopped running, stopped dodging. He turned to face his opponents, his eyes blazing with a fierce intensity. A hush fell over the arena as the war dogs closed in, their jaws open, their claws extended. But Reaper didn't flinch. He stood his ground, his body radiating an aura of power and defiance. The aliens leaned forward, their expressions puzzled. What was he doing? Why wasn't he fighting back? Then it hit them. The realization dawned on them like a thunderbolt. Reaper wasn't fighting them. He was controlling them. A collective gasp rose from the alien spectators. Their smug confidence evaporated, replaced by a mixture of shock, awe, and fear. The war dogs, instead of tearing Reaper apart, circled him, their movements mirroring his own. They were no longer predators, but obedient pets, their primal instincts overridden by an unseen force. Reaper raised a hand, and the Krellhound, Ragnarok, sat on its haunches, its massive head bowed. He pointed a finger and the Razorfang, Nemesis, rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable underbelly. He had done the impossible. He had tamed the untamable. The aliens watched in stunned silence as Reaper demonstrated his mastery over their war dogs. He commanded them to perform tricks, to run through obstacle courses, to spar with each other in a controlled display of aggression. He even had them fetch a stick, their alien physiology contorted into an approximation of canine playfulness. The crowd was in an uproar. Some aliens were enraged, their pride wounded by this unexpected turn of events. Others were fascinated, their scientific curiosity piqued by this display of unprecedented control. Dr. Zog remained stoic, his violet eyes fixed on Reaper. He had underestimated the human, had misjudged his capabilities. But he was not one to admit defeat easily. He descended from the platform, his chrome-like skin shimmering in the sunlight. He approached Reaper, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence. "Impressive," he said, his voice a low hum. "You have demonstrated a remarkable talent for animal control." Reaper met his gaze, his eyes cold and unflinching. "It's not just animal control," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "It's empathy. It's understanding. It's connecting with another being on a primal level." Dr. Zog tilted his head, his violet eyes narrowing. "Empathy?" he repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. A curious concept. He paused, his eyes gleaming. "But empathy alone is not enough to win wars," he added, his voice dripping with venom. Reaper smiled, a chillingly confident smile. "Perhaps not," he said. "But it's a damn good start." He turned to face the war dogs, his eyes blazing with an intensity that sent shivers down the aliens' spines. "And these," he said, gesturing towards the Krellhound and Razorfang, "are not just weapons. They are living beings, capable of loyalty, of affection, of devotion." He looked back at Dr. Zog, his gaze unwavering. "You have created powerful tools," he said. "But you have failed to understand their true potential." The tension in the air was palpable. A single spark could ignite a galactic war. But Reaper, with his unwavering confidence and his newfound connection with the war dogs, had turned the tables. He had shown the aliens that there was more to power than brute force, more to victory than conquest. He had given humanity a fighting chance. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien landscape, I couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, we could still find a way to bridge the chasm between our two species. A way to forge a new alliance, based not on fear and aggression, but on understanding and respect. Reaper's demonstration had sent ripples of unease through the alien council. Their absolute faith in their war dogs, their ultimate weapons, had been shaken. They had seen their creations, their pinnacle of genetic engineering, reduced to playful pups under the command of a single human. In the ensuing days, a tense negotiation began. Dr. Zog, though initially resistant, was intrigued by Reaper's methods. The idea of control through empathy, of harnessing the emotional bond between species, was a novel concept to the aliens, whose military strategies had always relied on brute force and technological superiority. Reaper, meanwhile, was patient yet unwavering. He understood that the aliens' pride had been wounded, their sense of dominance challenged. He approached them not as a conqueror, but as a teacher, offering to share his knowledge, to help them understand the power of empathy. He began by explaining the concept of the human-animal bond, the deep connection that had been forged over millennia of co-evolution. He spoke of trust, loyalty, and mutual respect, values that were foreign to the aliens' militaristic culture. The Krellhound, Ragnarok, and the Razorfang, Nemesis, became his living examples. He demonstrated how positive reinforcement, gentle guidance, and unwavering affection could transform even the most aggressive creatures into loyal companions. The aliens watched in fascination as Reaper interacted with the war dogs. He played with them, trained them, even shared his rations with them. He showed them that there was more to life than fighting, more to existence than dominance. Slowly but surely, the aliens began to understand. They saw the change in their war dogs, the softening of their eyes, the wagging of their tails, the eagerness to please their human companion. They witnessed firsthand the power of empathy, the transformative effect it had on both the giver and the receiver. Dr. Zog was the first to admit his fascination. He approached Reaper one evening, his chrome-like skin reflecting the soft glow of the alien moon. "I have been studying your methods, human," he said, his voice a low hum. "I am intrigued by this concept of empathy. It is a powerful tool, one that we have overlooked." Reaper nodded, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "It is indeed a powerful tool," he said. "But it is not a weapon. It is a bridge, a way to connect with others, to understand them, to coexist peacefully." Dr. Zog remained silent for a moment, his violet eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. Then he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Perhaps," he said, "we have something to learn from you, human." A glimmer of hope ignited in Reaper's eyes. He knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, that changing the deeply ingrained beliefs of an entire species would not be easy. But he also knew that the seeds of empathy had been sown, that the first steps towards a new understanding had been taken. And as he looked out at the alien landscape, at the Krellhound and Razorfang playing at his feet, he couldn't help but feel a sense of optimism. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for peace after all. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Reaper, with the hesitant blessing of the Alien Council, began to implement a comprehensive training program for the war dogs. He worked tirelessly, adapting his methods to the unique physiology and psychology of the Krellhounds and Razorfangs. He trained them not as mindless weapons, but as partners, as teammates. He taught them discipline, obedience, and most importantly, empathy. He showed them that their strength could be used for good, that their aggression could be channeled into protection and service. The transformation was remarkable. The war dogs, once terrifying instruments of destruction, became guardians, protectors, even healers. They learned to detect hidden explosives, to track down missing persons, to provide comfort to the sick and injured. The aliens were astonished by the change in their creations. They had never considered the possibility that their war dogs could be more than just weapons, that they could serve a higher purpose. The news spread throughout the alien empire, sparking a wave of interest in Reaper's methods. Other alien species, who had once feared the war dogs, now saw them in a new light. They requested Reaper's assistance, eager to learn how to harness the power of empathy for their own purposes. Reaper's influence extended beyond the war dogs. He began to teach the aliens themselves, sharing his knowledge of human psychology, of conflict resolution, of peaceful coexistence. He showed them that there were alternatives to war, that cooperation and understanding could lead to greater prosperity for all. Dr. Zog became Reaper's most ardent student. He spent countless hours observing Reaper's interactions with the war dogs, taking notes, asking questions. He was fascinated by the human's ability to connect with other beings on such a deep level, to understand their needs, their fears, their desires. One day, as they were walking through the alien capital, Dr. Zog turned to Reaper, his violet eyes gleaming with a newfound understanding. "I have learned much from you, human," he said, his voice a low hum. "You have shown me that there is more to life than conquest, more to power than destruction." He paused, his eyes searching Reaper's face. "I believe," he continued, his voice barely a whisper, "that we can forge a new path, a path of peace and cooperation." Reaper smiled, a warmth radiating from his eyes. "I believe we can too," he said, his voice filled with hope. The two of them stood there for a moment, two representatives of different species, different cultures, different worlds. Yet, They shared a common goal, a shared vision of a brighter future. And as they walked away, their footsteps echoing in the alien silence, they left behind a trail of hope, a promise of a new era of understanding and peace. A fragile peace settled over the alien world. The war dogs, once symbols of fear and aggression, were now celebrated as heroes and companions. Their presence on the streets no longer instilled terror, but rather a sense of safety and security. Children played with them, the elderly sought their comfort, and the soldiers marched alongside them, no longer as masters, but as partners. Reaper's influence had extended beyond the war dogs and the military. He had become a respected figure among the aliens, a symbol of hope and understanding. His teachings of empathy and cooperation resonated with many, sparking a quiet revolution within the alien society. Dr. Zog, once a staunch advocate of military might, now championed the cause of peace. He established research programs to study the human-animal bond, to explore the potential of empathy as a tool for conflict resolution. He even began to advocate for the release of certain prisoners of war, arguing that rehabilitation and reconciliation were more effective than punishment and retribution. But not everyone embraced this newfound peace. There were those who clung to the old ways, who saw Reaper and his teachings as a threat to their power and influence. They plotted in the shadows, whispering of rebellion, of a return to the glory days of conquest and domination. One day, as Reaper was conducting a training session with a group of young Krellhounds, a chilling message arrived from Earth. Human colonies on the Outer Rim were under attack. The assailants were not other alien species, but rogue factions of the same aliens who had once sought to challenge Reaper in the arena. These rebels, fueled by a twisted sense of nationalism and a thirst for power, had rejected Reaper's teachings and embraced the old ways of aggression and violence. They had stolen a squadron of genetically enhanced war dogs, bred in secret labs, and unleashed them upon unsuspecting human settlements. The news sent shockwaves through the Alien Council. Dr. Zog was devastated, his hopes for a peaceful future shattered. Reaper was filled with a cold fury, a burning desire for justice. He knew that he had to act, that he had to stop these rebels before they could inflict further harm on his people. He gathered his most trusted allies, both human and alien, and prepared for a desperate mission to the Outer Rim. As they boarded their ship, a sleek vessel capable of interstellar travel, Reaper turned to Dr. Zog, his eyes filled with determination. "We will stop them," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "We will show them that the path of peace is stronger than the path of war." Dr. Zog nodded, his violet eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "Go forth, my friend," he said, his voice a low hum. "And may empathy guide your way." The ship blasted off, leaving behind a trail of fire and hope. Reaper and his crew hurtled through the vastness of space, their destination a distant cluster of stars where the fate of humanity hung in the balance. As they approached their destination, a chilling transmission crackled through the ship's comms. It was the voice of the rebel leader, a cold, calculating voice filled with malice. "Reaper," the voice said, "you have interfered with our destiny for too long. Now, you will face the consequences of your actions." The transmission ended with a burst of static, leaving Reaper and his crew with a chilling realization. They were walking into a trap, a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to eliminate them and plunge the galaxy back into war. The question was, could Reaper and his allies overcome this new threat? Could they stop the rebels and restore peace to the galaxy? Or would their mission end in disaster, plunging humanity and the alien empire into a bloody conflict that could tear the very fabric of the cosmos apart?